So for today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the GCF, or the greatest common factor. In order to know what a greatest common factor is, we need to know a little bit of vocab beforehand, which means, what is a factor? Well, a factor is a number that when multiplied by another gives us a given answer. Alright. So then we also have the words product, which is the answer to a multiplication problem. And then we have the GCF, which is the lesson, which is the greatest common factor. That is the greatest factor, or the biggest factor, that two or more numbers have in common. So there can be multiple numbers that we're working with. Mostly we only work with two numbers, however. Now if we look down here, we have the method that we're going to use is called the list method or the rainbow method. The way I like it to call it is the rainbow method because it's very specific to the GCF. When we get to doing the LCM, the least common multiple, that has its own method, and it's very unique to the LCM. For rainbow method, it's going to be unique to the GCF. Now, in order to do this, in order to find the GCF, we need to do two things. One, we need to list all the factors of our two numbers here, and we're going to do our example here, 16 and 24. Then we need to circle the highest factor that's given numbers that the given numbers have in common. So let's zoom in here a little bit. We're going to be working with 16 and 24. I need to figure out what two numbers multiply to give me 16 first. And the easiest ones, the one I tell my students to always start with, are 1 and the number. So we're going to start with 1 and 16. And I have them create a rainbow there. Alright. Then we just kind of go up sequentially. From 1 we see, can 2 go into 16? Of course it can. We can do 2 and we can do 8. And then we connect those with a rainbow. And then I ask, can I do 3 into 16? And we should answer no. So then we go to 4, and I know 4 times 4 gives me 16. Now I don't write two 4s because we're writing out the factors. And since 4 is the factor, I do not repeat my factors. I just put a 4. Alright, we can see 4 as being connected to itself. Now, once I've repeated my factor, if I'm going up sequentially and I say 4 times 4, I can be done because I now know I've written all of my factors. And now I can move on to my next one, 24. So I'm going to start off doing the same thing, 1 and 24, and I'm going to connect those with my rainbow. And then I go up sequentially again, 2, and I know 12. 2 times 12 is 24. And then we're going to go, does 3 go into 24? Yes, it does. It goes in there 8 times. Alright. And then I go, does 4 go in there? Again, 4 does 6 times. Does 5 go in there? No. Does 6 go in there? Yes, and I've used it already, so that tells me I am done. I've repeated my numbers. So I've listed all the factors for both of my problems, for 16 and 24. I now need to go through and figure out what is the greatest factor they have in common. What is the biggest factor? Because we can see they do share common factors. They both have a 2, they both have a 4, and if we look, they both have an 8. I only care about the biggest number that they both share. In this case, it's going to be 8. So that is my GCF. I come over here to finish my problem off, and I write the GCF is equal to 8. And I'm going to box out my answer. So our students are going to see problems just like this, but they could also see a word problem. And here's a nice word problem for us. Mrs. Fry makes balloon arrangements for parties. She has 40 balloons total, 24 yellow and 16 white. Each arrangement must have the same amount of each color. What is the greatest number of arrangements that Mrs. Fry can make if every balloon is used? Now, this is going to be a great GCF word problem. But the question here is, how do I know it's a GCF word problem? Well, I need to read through the problem and look for something, it's a very big keyword, that means the biggest or the greatest. In this case, we have exactly that word. We have the greatest number. So since I see what is the greatest number of arrangements, that tells me it is a GCF problem. We're not going to work through this problem. We would do the exact same thing. We would find out all the factors of 40 and 24, and then we would figure out what our GCF is for her most arrangements she can make.